Hey everybody, welcome back to No Way, Tell Me Everything. Today, I have another special guest with me. I have Rita with me, who's going to talk about some really interesting topics, probably very new to this podcast, where we tend to focus on spirituality and personal growth. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about activism, but also from a spiritual lens, a personal growth lens. And I know Rita very circuitously, actually, because I feel like you've been this mythological creature for a little while in my head, because I hired one of your good friends to be my right-hand person and fell in love with her. She was a very big feminist awakening person for me. And she always talked so much about her friend Rita and, all the ways that Rita just followed what she wanted to do. And she lived this very unconventional to societal terms kind of way of living, of just following her joy and being really successful with that and loving it. And I always was like, that sounds amazing. I have to meet this person. And I never met you. But then all of my other friends in the circle would be like, oh, I met Rita. She's amazing. And I'm like, God damn it. I want to meet Rita. And then again, circuitously, our mutual friend, I was talking about my daughter, and then she mentioned your son's name. And then I found out that I actually have had a child in the same class with your kid for years. So I feel like we were very destined to meet. And then we didn't meet any of the ways that I would have expected to meet. We met very randomly at Roskilde Festival because you were taking photography. So we finally met. I finally met the mythical Rita, and I instantly loved your energy. I mean, I already knew that I'd like you because all of my friends loved you. Everything they said about you sounded so fascinating. And now I actually got to meet you, and it was lovely. And I just love everything that you're talking about on social. You're very active right now about the genocide in Palestine, among other things, political issues. And I wanted to invite you on because, so without any further rambling, welcome, Rita. Why don't you tell us who you are, what you do?
Thank you so much, Jessie. That was the sweetest introduction. And it also speaks to how much we are actually engaged in our children's parental activities at school. Maybe not enough, but yeah. So thank you for reaching out and inviting me in. I'm really excited and a little bit nervous about being on your podcast. Speaking on my second language, that's, not English, but yeah, English is my second language. You see, I already started babbling.
You're doing beautifully. Don't worry.
Thank you. But you'll bear with me if I butcher some expressions
Absolutely.
along the way. Well, yeah, I work mainly as a photographer. I work with portraits, artistic expression, working a lot with erotica. I've been doing a erotic magazine called Peachy Mag for the last few years. It's on pause at the moment. Spend a lot of my time doing like personal artistic projects and in the realms of like photography. And I've been working with music and events for many, many years. I've been a DJ since 2002, like when I was like 19 or 20. I started DJing, and that's been by far the job I have held for the longest ever. So I don't think I'm ever going to stop doing that. Yeah. And that's basically what I do. And then sometimes I get invited into like, various projects that are like out of my comfort zone. And I, if they in some way appeal to me, I'll just like jump head in. Yeah.
Like
But
this podcast.
yeah.
I think that was one of the things that always well, before I met our mutual friend, who I'll just call out, I don't think she'll care if I mention her on my podcast that has not thousands of listeners, but our friend Julie,
Hey,
when I
Julie.
hired her, I was like a baby feminist when she met me. Like I had just kind of realized that I was breaking away from my Christian upbringing, and I actually didn't align with a lot of these things. I was starting to expand my mind. And I met Julie, and it was like this huge awakening for me. We always laugh about when I interviewed her because she started talking about the feminist work she does. And anybody who've ever interviewed knows that, much like this podcast, I can't keep a single train of thought. So as soon as she started talking about it, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just getting into feminism and I love feminism. And I started going around my house and getting like this is my favorite feminist cup and this is my feminist wallet. And it was like a child, and she was like, that's cute. That's nice, But I was very much like awakening to become stronger in expressing those views as well.
Yeah.
And the one thing she always talked about with you when I was talking about these dreams that I had and I wanted to do this, but I was scary and like, what if I didn't have the opportunities and was it a possibility? And she was like, you wouldn't believe the opportunities that my friend Rita gets. These things come up for her and she just goes after them. And I really had this feeling of like, that sounds amazing. I wish that happened to me. And the more that it is happening to me, the more I kind of realize that I think when you have that attitude of like, yeah, this interests me, I'm going to do it, I'm going to at least try it, I feel like then you start pulling in more of these opportunities and things.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think that's what links this conversation about that your podcast very often centers around spirituality, because I think that is part of, at least, I don't know, like my spiritual belief, but it's also part of how I structured my life and my business. Being someone that's like neurospicy, we talked about this at Roskilde, like having ADHD is like, I've only noticed, when I was like past 40, because I think from the beginning, I was pretty good at like designing my life around, in a way that kind of like fit my flow, my workflow. And that also aligns very much with that way of running a business that is actually very different from what you will ever learn in business school about, about how you create opportunities for yourself, or how you should be like, you know,
Yeah. How you
growing
make the
or
most money.
expanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, so for me, it's very much about following the trails of energy, like whatever like feels. You can kind of like, you can, I think you can test it in a way on yourself. You can like take you can take two different ideas, two different options of stuff that you could throw yourself into, and you can almost like feel like what holds the most potent energy for you. And I would always go with the one that holds the most potent energy, like the one that like excites me in some way, or like makes my stomach tickle, or it feels a little bit like risky, or feels good. Like, it's so
But I
I
love that
think,
because that's like what's beaten out of us. It's like you don't go with what feels good for you because your rational mind starts going like, "Well, that's risky. That's not the safe choice, so I'm gonna go with this." And then you're not you're not taking the risk. You're not getting the big rewards. You're not getting the big happiness, right?
yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the gifts for me was never attending traditional business school. So no one taught me that this is the way you have to do it. But it is. It's very much like capitalist programming, because it's what, I mean, we have it like built into our language, like, no pain, no gain. Like, we are really trained to think that real accomplishment comes from like working really, really hard. And even just like real accomplishment, what is that? It's always focused on the end goal, which is also like a very like capitalist way of looking at it. Like, so what is success? Is it like growing into a specific size, or like having this amount of like revenue on your business? Or is it simply like enjoying what you do, like being fulfilled what you do? um for me, it's very much about just like rejecting that idea of working hard. And sometimes I was a little bit even shy about telling people, because it's so, um, I don't know, when you've been taught something, always it can seem like that you're bullshitting them.
Yeah, like
but
you're
I
just lying because you're not doing it. They're like, "Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
I feel the same thing." Yeah.
I feel like for now, like, I've been doing this for so many years that I can say that I speak from personal experience when I say that for me, it works very much to work more with like trust and listening over like hard work and just like forcing things through. Whatever, if there's something I don't really feel motivated doing, like if I don't really feel the energy, I can work my ass off, and I might get there, I might get it done, but the result will always be like flat. It won't be amazing in any way. So it's only when I like follow like the breadcrumbs of like joy or energy, the magic happens. That's when you create something that other people are drawn into, and that's also when you feel like you chose the right project, because then people wants to get engaged. They'll say yes. They won't say like, let me think about it. Nah, I think I'm gonna be too busy. You can feel it very much in the way that people also respond when you try to get them engaged, if you are on track with energetically on track with your projects, is my
Yeah.
experience.
No, total I mean, I'm just nodding and smiling because it is exactly how I feel, and, like, to your point that people just think, like, "Oh, you're bullshitting," but, like,
Mhm,
people have asked me, "How's your business going?" I'm like, "It's amazing. It's going so great, I love it." I'm like, "It's the most successful thing I've ever done if you take out the fact that I'm not making any money." But it's kind of a joke because I don't that for me, that's not success, but to your point, like, because of capitalism, how much money you make, how big you're growing, like, that
mhm,
is success metrics for most people, and it's not for me. For me, it is, do I wake up every morning excited to do this stuff?
mm,
Do I have creativity flowing? Do I feel joy? And it's the same thing with this podcast, to your point about attracting the energy and the opportunities. I think I've asked like 25 people to be on this podcast because this is fully a passion project. I'm not making
mhm,
any money out of this. I know that it plays into what I'm supposed to do in a larger sense. I don't know how, but I'm trusting the energy and the feelings that I have, and I really enjoy it. And
mm,
when I ask people to be on the podcast, I have had only 2 people not respond, but those 2 people are super famous celebrities, so those were
mm,
like, "I'm gonna shoot my shot," but I'm very aware that they might not even see this message, but
yeah,
everyone else I've asked has said yes, to the point that I'm, like, shocked because 'cause I'm like, "Holy crap,
mm,
I'm gonna have an Irish Paralympian triathlete. That's
mm,
amazing," you know? But I
fantastic.
think it's because energetically, they
Mm,
can feel that. And one
yeah,
of the things you said actually ties in nicely to a question I had for you, that you mentioned how there's this, patriarchal capitalistic way of thinking that it's about a completion, about finishing something. And one of those things, for example, sexuality and sex,
mm,
it's very visible for me in the work that you choose to
mm,
do and what you find joy in has this kind of angle to it of forward thinking, of liberation, of freedom. And I think Peachy Magazine is something, and the whole thing you've been doing with Peachy in general is something that lacks in a lot of spaces where it's very much not for the male gaze, right?
mhm, mhm.
And I was just wondering if you could just tell us a bit more about what it is that you're doing with Peachy.
Yeah, I've been very much interested in exploring like the gazes, or the predominant gaze that we are all like conditioned to view everything through. So like the male gaze, and both uh I think people of all genders have been conditioned by the male gaze, and are like, even in sexual relations, are maybe even like striving for the end line, because it's so much what we have been taught in, for instance, mainstream porn. And porn is, whether we like porn or not, it's a very important educator of humans into sexuality. So the problem is when you have a very toxic industry with a very, very predominant male gaze that teaches sexuality, or like, the act of fucking in a very specific way, that leaves extremely limited space for other different ways of exploring, and different perspectives and different body types. Everything wholesome that should be in the spectrum of sexuality is, we'll get like this narrow, like tunnel vision into maybe like 10% of what's there, and we will be told that this is the way. So with my work, that is, it continues, even though that the magazine, physical magazine on whole, my work continues, because I think it's really important. And that's, of course, exploring pleasure, exploring joy, even liberation. I think through sexuality, it's also such a life energy to reckon with.
I just wanted to touch on it quickly just because I think it is really important,
Mm-hmm.
um, that these kind of places and
Mm,
art and
mm,
materials exist for
mm,
people, exactly to your point, to be able to look outside of what we're being fed by the mainstream.
mm.
I mean, I grew up in the 90s with Kate Moss, for example, and all of the images that I saw were one body type, and it was a very
Yeah,
unhealthy
yeah.
body type, and I have 2 girls, so I really love the body positivity movement
Mm,
that's been going on. Another discussion is I feel it's unfortunately gone a little bit backwards again, but I'm hoping it comes back again, and so I
mm.
think places like the stuff that you're doing with Peachy and the space of safety that you're creating for those people, myself included as a queer person, I think is extremely important.
I also think just like I just want to come back to like, whether or not we like porn, it's going to be there. And I think actually it's a very feminist thing to be working with like creating alternative, or I won't even say alternative, but just like broaden, like giving more space to the way that we can explore this and be educated by this. So that it won't be like, this is the only thing you can find. So this is the only thing there must be. So we will try to like broaden the gaze and look for like, center other people's joy than joy that is centered in mainstream
Mainstream porn.
porn. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. I absolutely agree with you. But what I brought you on originally to talk about, because anybody who listens to podcasts also knows that I can have a conversation for hours about anything. So I could continue, but I really want to make sure we talk about what I brought you on to talk about because I think you're such a great voice for this and you have a really great opinion on it. So I wanted to talk about how people can get into activism. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you is what is advice that you can give to people about how to get involved in activism, political or otherwise, really,
Mhm.
but if they're worried about saying or doing the wrong thing? Because this was really what sparked me inviting you on. I can't remember exactly what the post was, but it was something like if you're scared to say the wrong thing, it's okay. You're allowed to make mistakes. You're a human,
Mm,
but don't stay silent. Don't let it hold you back. And
mm,
so I think that's something that a lot of people worry about. I know when I was at my past workplace, I was in charge of DEI education for the leaders. And there was a lot of people who don't really know much about the space. And so I was trying to help educate about how we can talk about it, how we can be respectful of each other. And the main concern specifically was I'm really scared to even talk about it because what if I say something wrong? And I think the same thing applies to activism. It can feel really big and scary for people, but there are good ways to get involved. I'm
yeah.
hoping you can have some advice there.
Yeah. Well, it actually really makes me think about something that Bell Hooks is writing about in her book All About Love, when she says like the way the capitalist empire is like some of the weight it's putting on us is that we don't want our voices to be heard. Like we want to like we want to like hide our voices, because then no one can come for us and like
Mm.
criticize us. So this is what we've been seeing a lot of. Like we've really been challenged on this thing like for the last few years. I mean, it's not like social justice movement started 2 years ago with the genocide, but I think a lot of people have been really challenged on this, like because this is a very sensitive. It's a subject that creates a lot of potential pushback, and it makes a lot of people very scared because we all want to fit in. We all want to be accepted by the community, by the crowd. It's very human, I get it. I really understand, like, I mean, I feel it as well. Sometimes just like the urge to just like slowly glide into the background and not be seen,
Do the
which is
Homer Simpson meme where you just go back into the
no,
bush.
yes,
Yeah.
which is I mean, it's a privilege to be able to hide yourself also, and we need to acknowledge that because there's a lot of people who are not able to do that. And I also I just want to speak to, because it actually leads back to what we were just talking about before. Also, like, it's not that I'm going to make this whole podcast about capitalist conditioning,
You
but
can
it
do that if
is
you want to. I'm
actually
not a capitalist fan.
very much. I think it's again like something that we have very much been programmed to think is that when we do stuff, we have to do it right. It's dangerous. Like we cannot make mistakes, or you kind of, it's a mechanism that makes us want to hide ourselves, as Bell Hooks is explaining, so that we won't, get punished by society. I just want to highlight, yesterday I did this lecture with an amazing PhD Mexican medicine woman called Rosales Meza. and she teaches on like decolonial medicine. And she says so many like really profound things about this. And she goes into this exactly, that perfection as a concept is a colonial construction. And it's a colonial construction that kind of like wants to scare us from giving our medicine. So we want to be perfect because we don't want to be criticized. But actually, making mistakes or being criticized, the fear of that belongs very much in the ego. And so what she's inviting us to say, like, can we change to like a more ancestral gaze where what we're going for is not perfection, but impact? And like ask ourselves, like, what does my community need? What is my service? And just take some of the heat away from our own personal need of being acknowledged as being like a good person or doing the right thing, because it's not about us, it's about the collective. Because again, what capitalists, even in spiritual communities, are teaching us is that we are hyper individual, but we're not. We belong together because, I think we had this conversation briefly also, like, when we say like we're all connected, we're all one, this means also that it's not, you can't just sit isolated and work on your own enlightenment. You have to really like work for the collective liberation. And in doing so, like, you have to just like also like work to decolonize or decapitalize the way of thinking about liberation.
Mm.
Does that
Also
make
within
sense?
yourself, right?
No, definitely with it. It's like, this is the first place you do it. And this is the first place where you stop yourself bringing your medicine. When she talks about medicine, of course, she talks about like your gift or your service to the world, but it's letting yourself be controlled by the fear that you will be criticized to do something that you actually believe.
I think we all have those gifts. And I think the thing is that, again, because of the way we talk about things, when we talk about your medicine, right, or your gift that you can give, people think it's like this big thing. So they're like, oh, I don't have this, ability. I'm not eloquent. Like, I can't express myself like you. So I can't talk.
Mm,
Listen, your hands are a gift. You can help.
mm,
Your resources are a gift. Your ears are a gift for listening and holding space. There are so many ways to
exactly.
give your gifts further to
Yeah.
the world. So my personal story with getting involved is I was never involved for most of my life. I said the typical white woman thing of, I don't like politics. I don't like politics. I don't want to get involved. They're all icky. And I still stand by they're all icky for the most part. Like, I don't idolize politicians. I have a really big issue with people idolizing politicians because they're meant to work for us, for the community, and represent us. They're not meant to be put on a pedestal. I think that's a lot of the problem, right? But I didn't get involved because one, I didn't know anything about it. But instead of going, I don't know anything about it, I need to educate myself, I just went, I don't know anything about it. So I had to change that. I had to go, I don't do that. If I don't know about something, I'm going to go look it up. I'm going to figure it out. The other thing was I had to acknowledge my privilegedness. And some of that
Mm,
happened when I moved here and met a lot of people from different backgrounds that had different experiences. And when I heard them talking about it, it really opened my eyes to the fact that I did have a privilege not to be involved because I wasn't affected. My family wasn't affected. And I looked back on my ancestry and we moved from Hungary to the US because we were Jewish. So I should have had more, empathy and understanding to people having issues like that, but I didn't. I was like, we're safe now. We're white. We're in America. We're fine.
mm,
It's okay. The other thing was that I got really okay with accepting accountability for when I do make mistakes, because to your point, everyone makes mistakes. We're
mm,
humans. That's natural. If you don't make mistakes, you're not going to grow. You're not going to get to do the fun, risky things we talked about earlier. You have to be resilient. You have to make mistakes and you have to be okay with that and not take it personally. So
mm.
when I make a mistake and say a friend of mine who's a person of color says, actually, this is, what you should say. I go, oh, okay, I'm so sorry. I'll make sure to take that on board. Or
Yes,
if
yes.
I dead name somebody by accident, I always apologize and then I correct it. Or if I, use the wrong pronouns, like I think that's a big one that I see with a lot of our transgender community
Mhm.
is people don't involve them in conversations or talk to them because they're afraid that they're gonna say the wrong pronouns or misgender them, and it's like, listen, I have enough transgendered friends who have told me at least that they would rather us make mistakes in good faith, trying to understand their perspective and help the experience than just completely avoid it. And
Of
so it
course. Yes,
to your
definitely.
point, it's totally okay to make mistakes. You should look at mistakes as opportunities to grow and to
Mm,
do better, and then it's not hurtful, and then you're not as afraid to do that, right? Because we
yeah.
all do have, in my opinion, an obligation for the community, and I think I've been very disappointed with a lot of people in the spiritual space. There's this whole idea of, "I'm just not gonna get involved because this is lower frequency or it's part of the
Mhm.
matrix, and I don't wanna get involved with it." And I think that's incredibly problematic, and again, when I look at who's saying those things, I think it's, again, white privilege because
Yes.
they're not affected. They're the people that they're hanging out with, the groups they're hanging out with are not affected yet.
I very much agree. And the spiritual community is also become an industry, like it's also an industry, and it has also become colonized. To me, like social justice and spirituality is like linked together, like
Yeah.
inseparable.
Yeah,
That's
it
what
always has
that's
been.
what that's what it's for. I think I think our spiritual praxis at the moment right now is very much about finding ways to hold the grief, to hold the fear, the insecurity about what's happening in the world. This is what we can use these practices for, is to find a way to like recalibrate our system and come back and show up, and just
Mhm,
like be human. And because like all this like grief and rage, and like I'm not having that like low frequency emotion. They're human. They're very transformative. They're not like, there's no emotions that are wrong, but like going, like working, like grounding these emotions so they can be like channeled out in actual action. That's what I think our spiritual guidance is telling us to do right now. Like, and it's not just to sit in, a fancy privileged yoga studio and only just work for our own wellness, peace of mind. That's not it. That's not it. And I love the thing you're saying. I totally agree with everything. I think I would have had it as points myself,
sorry.
but I did. No. It's a conversation. I love it. um But I just wanted to get back to your question about, so I started talking about, the urge to kind of hide ourselves. And I think, there's so many ways you can show up without taking center stage and being like, the biggest killjoy of them all. There are little ways that you can show up for, social justice, even if it's like having the difficult conversations with your family or with friends, and not let it pass when talking points are being made in spaces that you're part of that you highly disagree with, or that are harming to others. Or something like boycotting. I want to just like keep coming back to, um, yesterday I met this woman actually, and I was supposed to speak about it in the yoga studio. She approached me in, I don't know why, and but it was very wholesome. Like she came up to me in the changing room, and she said like, "Do you know the feeling sometimes where you just feel like really useless or like helpless in terms of what's going on in the world?" I don't know. For some reason, like she felt like I might
You could
have
feel your
something
energy.
for her.
She knew you were a safe space.
Yeah, and then I told her like, but it's not, first of all, it's not true. Second of all, it's very counterproductive. And it's like, I think it's also training ourselves to see how much we can actually do. Like every day, every decision you make, you can have an effect, you can be mindful of how you affect the whole. And not just around Gaza, around many things. And I know we can't all do everything, but choosing where we put our money is a big one. It's a big one. I don't understand. It's such a small sacrifice. I don't understand why people will still go into a McDonald's or buy Coca-Cola or go to Starbucks or to Sarah. It's like, fuck Sarah. You can get, I'm sorry, can I curse in your
Yes, of
podcast?
course. Yes.
We
Yeah.
didn't clear that before. Okay.
No, no,
I
of
mean,
course.
there
Go
are
ahead.
so many ways that you can just like choose your own little rebellion, everyday rebellion, saying like, I am not going to, because money is energy. I'm not going to give you my energy. I'm not going to give you my love. I'm not going to give you my attention. I'm going to put it over here with these people, you know?
I think
And
there's two things that I think I've heard around that because the one thing I wanted to say as well is like you're saying, you can choose how you show up and what you're capable of. Like, I've been to many protests, I've been to many marches, but they really are very hard on my nervous system. So
mhm,
I very pick and choose which ones I feel okay being in. So what I've decided to do, and I've been doing for years now, is exactly what you're talking about. I boycott with my
mm,
money and I donate my money. So I've been donating money to an organization for medical aid in Palestine for a very long time because for me, I don't feel comfortable using my body in those cases, but I can use my
yeah,
money. So I've
yeah,
been donating money and I've been boycotting. And I was actually back home last year in November. And my friends, Amazon's huge, right? And Amazon's huge in the
mm,
States. And so one of my friends was buying a lot of things from Amazon. And I'm not gonna lie, some of them I was like, "Oh, this is great." And she was like, "Yeah, and, like, you can get it off Amazon." And I was like, "I can't, because I don't shop with Amazon. I don't buy them."
mm,
We're watching shows and I'm like, "Oh, man, this show is great, but I'm never gonna see it again because I won't buy Amazon Prime because 'cause I'm boycotting." I have a boycotting app on my phone that if I go out to the supermarket, I've done some, like, check already, right? But if I'm not sure, I'll check if something
mm,
is on this boycott list. And one thing that I've heard is to your point about individualism, people are very individual, right? So they're not thinking, oh, this one Coke is going to make a difference. So then they rationalize with themselves, like, I'm just one person. This is just one Coke, you
mm,
know? Or the same thing with money. I think that has been my biggest thing that I've talked to a lot of people about is you do not understand the money aspect that we hold because energetically, yes, but also capitalistic wise,
mhm,
yes. Because supply and demand, if enough people stop buying a product or giving their money to companies that are, I mean, it's not even just genocide, right? Like Zara, H&M, they're horrible, horrible
mm,
retailers that are polluting and destroying the environment as well. If you stop shopping there and you force them to make change, they can't survive without us giving them our money. And you might think you're only one person, but when a lot of one people add together, it does have a really big impact. Because unfortunately, some people that feel like they're useless or they're powerless, there are some things that we can't impact right now. But you have things that you can impact on right now, and they don't require a lot of you, they don't require you to talk about it with your mom and dad, which might seem really hard. They don't require it to fight with your friends if that feels insurmountable, but your wallet can do a lot.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, so
Yeah.
there's so many different ways you can show up. And then, I mean, I was just thinking, just coming back to the conversation I had with this woman yesterday in the yoga gym, and also like the thing she said about, she was like, yeah, and she was saying like, I'm really trying to like, boycott and do all these things that I can in many different ways, and I feel, I just feel useless. And I just want to speak to that as well. And it makes me think about something that my mentor and friend, who's uh, a very spiritual, but Black American, African American Black woman from Nebraska, who comes out of a Black Panther family, and she tells me like, like, because I know her so well, she'll be like mothering me, but in a like little bit of a harsh way sometimes, and she will say like, yeah, but you white people, you are also very accustomed to, if you can't change things with your anger or your sorrow or your actions in a very short time span, you'll just like give in to,
Mm,
hopelessness or apathy. You're like, oh, it's no use. I can't do anything. And what she says is like, look at the people who has been resisting their whole life, whose life itself is a resistance. Those are the ones we need to look for when we feel hopeless, when we feel like it's of no use, because I mean, we have so much to learn about resilience and about like long span change, that it doesn't happen overnight. And also like it's not that I'm not trying to like name drop a lot. I really just want to like do right by like naming the people that I'm inspired by, because I think that's a very important also part of the colonial praxis.
Yeah.
But Angela White Davis says as well, and I think that I always come back to that line. She also writes that, or maybe it's one of her speeches, that she says, like, sometimes you have to do the work, even though you don't see the change in the horizon. And this means that, I've spoken to Palestinians that are like, I know Palestine will be free one day, maybe not in my lifetime, but it will be free. And the same kind of belief in, like sometimes we have to do the work, even though we don't even, maybe we won't even get the benefit of seeing like the fruits of the work, but we'll do it for others. We'll do it because, you know, that's how we as humanity has to like come together to, we have to like fight for each other, even though we don't see the result, back to like what we spoke about in the beginning, wanting to see results of our work. We do the work because it's the right thing to do, because we believe in it. We believe that everyone has everyone deserves freedom. Everyone deserves to be able to live and be free. And, you know, maybe our grandchildren is going to see the benefit of, this new paradigm being birthed and the old one dying. Maybe it's going to be much further down the line, but, we have to do the work.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I mean, you can look at certain countries, certain also countries from history and time periods, and you can spot the pattern of when people fought back, change, no matter how incremental it was, happened. And when people just accepted and didn't question, which I think is a big thing that people don't do enough these days, that's when you see these like bad events, that we talk about in history. And I think I completely agree with you. Like, I'm not doing the things that I'm doing because I want to be responsible or see the immediate outcome of it. I want a better world for my children and for their friends and for all the other children in the world and everything. And to that point, I think we don't do enough looking around and realizing that we're all humans and we actually have way more in common than we have differences. But we get so focused on which government we're in, where we sit in, which country we're from. I mean, country lines are arbitrarily made. This is one earth we all live on. I
Mhm.
don't think anyone owns it. But we get like, I'm American and, I'm this and I'm Christian or I'm that. And it's like, listen, if you take a step back, do you believe that everybody has the right to be free, to live with safety, to have food, to have water? I think 99% of people would say, yeah, I agree with that. But then it's like, then I need you to look at the bigger picture. The things that we're doing today as a society, are they aligning with that principle that you have? Because I would argue probably not.
Yeah.
And then what do we do about it? And every little increment helps. And also, your mentor is right. We're white people are very used to having it easy. Like, that's the part where I mean, like, I can say that and feel totally fine accepting that I've had an easier life than a lot of other people. Have I had an easy life in my own perspective? No, I've had a difficult life, but I'm able to look at other things that people have gone through and said, in the scope of things, yes, I've had an easy life. But I feel like a lot of us are not used to having to fight for basic rights, for
Mhm.
being ourselves, for being authentic, because that was always a given. So we do give up easier. But when you look at people who have been fighting their whole lives, I mean, if we want to take an example of a white person who's been fighting their whole lives for something, look at Gloria Steinem, for example. She's been fighting for feminist rights forever and ever, and she never stops. And The US is not much different than it was when she started fighting, but she's still keeping up the fight. So there are people of all races, genders, everybody fighting for equality, and I know it's a very common phrase, like, whenever there's a tragedy, at least it is what I've heard growing up, that they say, "Look for the helpers." So whenever there's a tragedy and everything seems overwhelming and everything seems hard, look for the people who are helping other people, and that's your faith in humanity. And we can do the same thing with stuff like this, where it seems hard and it seems insurmountable, and it's exactly that. Look at the people who've been doing it their whole lives. Those are our version
Mhm.
of the helpers. Those are the change makers, right? Believe
Exactly.
in that hope.
Yes, very much.
Well, all right. So the next question, I feel like we've actually kind of already answered these because the conversation has just gone really naturally, which is so lovely. Um, I guess, what would be your number one piece of advice to people who are looking to get involved? What would be your first step if you were brand new to the game of activism, whether it's
Yeah.
political, environmental, anything? What would be the first thing you would do?
Okay, so three things I would advise everyone to do that everyone can do. First thing we talked about, start boycotting. Download a good app. There is a great app called No Thanks. It's run by Palestinian. It's run by the BDS movement. You can check barcodes if you don't know if if a product stems from Israel, in some way benefits from the genocide. And you can also always open proof if you want to see like why a product is boycotted. So boycott. Use your wallet, use your skills, like figure out what are you good at. You know? It's we all have something that we're good at that we can contribute with. Are you good at writing? Are you good at speaking? Are you a musician? Whatever it is, are you just good at making money? Just like make the money flow, like make them flow. Like there are literally 2 million people right now that needs funds, you know? So that's like just figuring out like what do you have to contribute with, and then I would say like just train your voice, start just like practicing using your voice, even if it's in little ways. Just like test out the water, like what feels safe. I mean, using like wearing a kufia or a t-shirt or just a little watermelon pen, that's using your voice. Um, and I also want to say, like, I mean, this is not only about Gaza. This is about, I mean, there are so many different ways. It's like I don't want to limit it to this because we also need to talk about Congo and Sudan. But like already there, like you can make a decision that you're not gonna go and buy the next new iPhone. It's like and you just like say like I'm not gonna contribute to that like line of production. I did that. I said, like, I'm never ever gonna buy a new phone again. I will just buy used phones that is being like fixed. That's there are so many little. I think like look for the little activist actions you can do in your everyday, especially if you are not comfortable with like using yourself, using your voice or your person, or if you're in a position where you can't risk, I mean, where it could cost you your job or,
Mhm.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of people who are not. This is also a privilege to be in a position where you can use your voice. So if you are,
Mhm.
use it, but and also acknowledge that some people are not. Some people face real consequences for doing that, depending on where you are in the world and where you are and what's your position in the society. So yeah, I think that's the three things that I would say like it's like first steps.
Yeah. You reminded me of something that I think speaks nicely to this as well. But you were saying like do the little things, like just do a bunch of little things. If you can't or if you don't feel comfortable, doing the louder things, to your point, if you're not
Mhm.
able or you're just not quite there yet, you want to work up to it. I went to this World War II museum in the summer. And there was a whole section on the French resistance fighters, and it was such an interesting section because they were obviously living in Nazi-occupied France, so they couldn't overtly do anything without risking being arrested or killed. So they would just do all these little tiny annoying and also bigger, like, they would cut telephone lines, for example, but they would also just do a lot of really tiny annoying things that disrupted their day, their communication, their ability to get across town. It was a network of people who just secretly annoyed them
Hmm.
all the time until they, were able to do bigger things, and I feel like that feels a little bit to me the same. It's like you can still make their life harder even if you're just doing little things. Do those make
Yes.
some CEO in a boardroom really annoyed at, like, all these little annoyances. That can be you. You can be that annoying little person. Do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like to picture, like, I like the picture of like throwing sand into a machinery, because
Yeah.
this like war industry is like this big, well functioning, like huge animal of like a machine. And I just want to like I also come, like, my grandfather was also like a resistance fighter during the Second World War, and he was working in sabotage, and he was working in he was a factory worker, and they were like sabotaging weapons that the Germans were using, so like the cannons would just like blow up when they were fired and stuff. And it's just a picture of like, with everything, it's just like throwing sand into the machinery.
Yeah.
um Not
Throw
literally. I
sand
mean,
into the
there's very few of us
No, but
who's
I
in a
love it.
position where we
Yeah,
can
but that's such a
sabotage
great
weapons,
metaphor, like,
but
throw sand into the machinery. That should just be, like, the, metaphor for doing these little actions.
yeah,
You're throwing sand into the
yeah.
machinery. I love it.
Yes, refusing to buy something that's out there and being heavily promoted is very much throwing sand into the
Oh,
machinery.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, coming from a corporate background where I sold products, like, a product launch was a huge thing, and that first week after a product launch, if there were no pre-sales, if there was no sales, you better believe the VP was up there having a real hissy fit about what went wrong and why it's not working. So, totally, you can have a seriously big impact. And, yeah, on that note, I wanna thank you so much for being here today. I think, hopefully everyone feels like they got some little steps they can take to throw sand into the machinery. Do you want to promote anything? Do you have any events or anything coming up that you want to talk about?
Thank you so much for having me aboard. And it was so much fun. Okay, if you're not around the Copenhagen area, like, just ignore this. But we will be doing on the 17th of October, we'll be doing a club event out at a very cute venue called Sidste Mole. And that's going to be a supportive event for a Gazan musician and composer called Ahmed Main. And he has gathered a choir in Gaza where he trains the young people there, the young displaced people, in kind of like using music as a way of like building mental and spiritual strength to kind of like stand, just like go through this whole like trauma that they're living through. So that would be, for instance, like, the sound of drones are very like terrorizing for people. So he will teach them to make like harmonies on drone sound. And they will, I mean, it's so beautiful. So he will actually teach them to like recalibrate their system from listening to something that is like breaking down their will and spirit to making it into something beautiful. And we're so at ave of his project and his work that we're going to throw this party to gather funds to support him. And we are gonna, if it's possible, we're gonna do a live session in the beginning with him where we will sing together with him and his choir. There's a lot of stuff that needs to, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can happen where we have some different versions of this
Yeah.
if it's not gonna be possible to be live. But that's one thing. It's gonna be live music. It will turn into a club event. And still, if you're in Denmark, there's the big national march at 4th of October that I can, just want to invite everyone to join. And there's also blogs where there's more like low key vibes if you feel like very easily overstimulated by the big demonstration. I totally get that. Yeah, and then I was just thinking maybe we could put some links in the show notes. Like, I would love to recommend people, if they're interested in decolonializing your spiritual practice, to look into dr. rosalesmeza's work. And Black Nurse Leader, my mentor, can be found. She's mostly on TikTok. I'm not, but she is by that name. She goes by that name on TikTok. And download the No Thanks app. I think that's
Thanks is also the one that I use. It's really easy. It's so easy to use. Really great.
Yes.
So, yeah, everyone, thanks for listening today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you feel a little bit more fire in you to get involved in whatever cause kind of sparks your joy around it. Just try it out, get started. Promise it'll make you feel really great and you'll learn so much about it. It's much needed work right now. Thanks everyone for listening. Check me out on social at jess.solstice, and also check out my website at jess-solstice.com. And everybody have a great week, and we'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.